Hello, everyone. My name is Gary Gustafson, and I am the president of Preferred Marketing Programs, and I'm a managing partner of TOPS Learning Institute. The reason for our interview today is to discuss some important considerations for everybody in the government marketplace. I knew that this webinar would be informative to all government contractors and/or potential contractors, and I wanted to reach out to an expert in the field to join me. I'm very pleased that TJ Jackson, CEO of Buffalo Supply, Inc., has agreed to be here with us today. TJ has a vast knowledge of the market, and I'm looking forward to his exchange of this information. Hey, TJ, how's it going?
I am doing very well. How are you today, Gigi?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. Thanks again for joining us. And, we've talked before about the complexities of the government and what a good idea it might be for you and I to put out a little interview and put some information out there that would be helpful to those people who want to work in the government and be successful.
Sure.
So, I just say again, thanks for joining us. You said thanks back. Let's get started.
Okay. Good.
I think that there's so many things about the government that our audience won't understand in the beginning. Let's start at the very beginning and just kind of give us an idea of why it's so important to work with the government.
I think there are a couple of reasons. One, in the U.S. domestic market, the purchasing power of the government is about 5% of the total healthcare spend. So that's nothing to shake off. I mean, that's billions of dollars that is out there as an opportunity. And I think in this time when things are tight, it's important to hit every aspect that we can in the marketplace. But the other side of it, and we've always taken a great amount of pride in doing it, is we work with high quality medical supply companies to provide products to our service members and veterans they should have access to. And it's difficult to work with the government, but if you can get through that and understand how to do it, then everyone wins.
That's correct, and that's a good answer. Appreciate that. And I just wanted to say, you and I have been working together on the government for a long time, and we both know how complex it can be. Can you just chat with us a little bit about what it means to be on contract?
Sure. Yeah, you'll hear that around a lot. I mean, the contracting officers, especially, but even people out, the end users will often ask, are these products on contract? Because they know it's important to be on contract. So what does on contract mean? Typically, I've been doing this since '03. Back then, it really meant, are you on federal supply schedule, which is commonly called an FSS, or you'll hear, are you on VA contract or GSA contract? And the nomenclature, the names for those is just on who's administering it, but they're all federal supply schedule. Over the last 36 months or so, that's changed a bit, and there's a lot more emphasis on some other vehicles, namely the IDIQ, the ECAT, electronic catalog, that the DoD has always used. Is still popular with them, but the VA can also use it, and they've been pushed to use it, even though it's not gone super fast, but I think you're going to start to see that. And so the key thing on being on contract is understanding what contract vehicles are out there, which ones you should be on, which ones your competitors are on, and how to get into the marketplace in a way that makes the most sense.
That's a great answer. And when I hear that answer, I think, man, this really is difficult and it really is complex. There must be a lot of differences in the government marketplace and the commercial marketplace. But
sure. I think that it's a little bit, it's kind of there's two sides to that. One is that, yes, it is different. One thing you really need to make sure you understand if you're working with the federal government is the federal acquisition regulations, which, is this big 2,000 pages of rules and regulations you have to follow. And you really got to make sure you stay on top of that. What happens with the government that's different than the commercial side is you have civil and criminal penalties can be assessed, and they bandy around words like you're trying to defraud the federal government if you violated contract. I mean, it's some crazy stuff. And so you really need to stay on top of it. The other side of it, though, is, the nomenclature of the people inside the hospitals, the names are a little bit different. You might not know exactly how to navigate that. They can be difficult to get on base at times if you're going to a DoD, but it's not always that way, and the VAs are pretty easy. And so a lot of it is, from our perspective, it kind of feels like Oz. And what we do at Buffalo Supply is we talk about pulling back the curtain on the almighty Oz and realizing that it's not that scary a place. And there's actually a lot of opportunity there, and you shouldn't drive right by.
Well, I think you and I've had this conversation before. We used to do a training class once a year for
Yeah.
new people working on the government for their companies. And I always used to ask that one question, how many of you chose to be here to lead your
Right.
company in the government sales? And none of them would raise their hands. They all got chosen to do it. Everybody thinks it's scary.
Right.
And until you get into it and learn what's going on, that usually doesn't change. So
Well, and
go
I
ahead.
think to that point, I think that often the national accounts people that are assigned the government, they might be newer to it. It might be because their leadership doesn't understand the importance and the complexity of it. Is they're like, oh yeah, here's, you have these GPOs, but also you get the government this year. And we have people that come in who don't know their contracting officer if they're on contract, haven't updated their prices in years. And there's all kinds of rules around that where you can only change your prices so often depending on the contract vehicle and all that. And I think often what happens is it just gets shoved to the back. And all of a sudden you've got prices that haven't been adjusted in 5 years and you're almost giving them away. And so I think that really what you need to do is make sure that if you were going to go on federal contract of any of these contracts, is that as a national accounts person, you really need to know the rules and be able to dedicate the time to keep your company in compliance.
Rules and regulations, the things that scare everybody.
Yes.
So, which kind of leads me into my next question. You can really get into this deeply, but just briefly, what do companies need to know in order to do business with the VA or DoD?
I think that the big thing is understanding the complexity, right? It's understanding that you need to jump in with whatever contract vehicle you're on. And if you're on multiple contract vehicles, they're often similar, but not the same. And really understanding what the terms and conditions are. Like there are certain items, if we start talking about pricing, we can get into how the commercial and government marketplace are different, but let's get to there in a minute. I think that the big thing is, as I just mentioned, to stay on top of it, to train your reps on what those rules are and make sure they understand as much as they can and that they know that they can reach out to you and that you will help guide them. The biggest thing with the government is really going back to the rules and regulations is making sure you stay on top of it, know what's going on, and it gives you a competitive edge when your competitors don't know that. And so I think that's the deal. And often it comes down, if you're looking at bid boards, there are these bid boards through FedBizOps, FBO, that you need to monitor. And that's where they post things. They'll post them for certain days, but sometimes you'll get a posting on a Friday that ends on Monday. And you need to be on top of it. And you need to be on top of, working with the end users and those federal customers to really, to get your product out there first. So when those bid board comes out, they're looking for your product and not your competitors.
Yeah, good. I appreciate you giving us that answer. We've talked many times. There are hundreds of questions that we could go over,
Sure.
and we don't have that much time in today's session. But I'd like to invite you back to do future sessions. Maybe
Sure.
we'll do a whole series of these, but
I love it.
we'll really get into some nuts and bolts of each of these questions. I did want to get into one other question though that comes up a lot. Almost everybody I talk to asks me about pricing. Uh, what do I need to know about pricing to the government? Is it true that if I sign a contract with the government, I have to give them my absolute best pricing? And I thought
Sure.
I would throw that out to you.
Yeah, and you're right. Everyone has, that's one of the first questions everyone asks. The other thing that I hear is that the government demands your most favorite pricing, and they might ask for it, but they're not entitled to it. What they are looking for, and what they should be looking for, and I think it's a fair approach to it, is for what they call fair and reasonable pricing. And what that means is that you look at what the government's purchasing power for that would be, and align them with the GPO, IDN group, someone that has a similar size and terms and conditions. And then what you want to do is negotiate off that price. And I say negotiate off that price, typically they're going to ask for that price. Now, where you might negotiate it is often a GPO will pay for shipping. Where the federal government requires shipping be included, standard shipping, expedited, you can increase the charge for when needed. But for standard shipping, so if the GPO they're aligned with doesn't include shipping, then what you could do is find a way to calculate that and to work it into the price. And there's any number of ways to do that, and it can get real complex. But at the same time, the key important thing is that you don't have to give them the best price, but you need to work to align and give them fair and reasonable pricing.
Well, they're going to challenge you, and I think they feel that the commercial customers probably get a better deal. I don't know why they would think that, but they do, and so they're going to make you prove, like you say, what you say, they want to make sure it's okay.
Well, and they're going to ask for, if you have written pricing agreements that are better than what you're offering, they're going to ask to see them in the pre-award section of your contract review. And because you're going to need to prove why they shouldn't get that price. And it can be all kinds of things. It can be that GPO X, Y, or Z guarantees 90% of the spend on your product line will go to you. It can be a volume deal. It can be all these different things. And the government can't guarantee any of those things.
Right.
And so part of that is just negotiating through and understanding in those disclosures, which, by the way, are protected and they're not for FOIA requests. So if someone sends if your competitor, if you were to send in your information and a competitor send a Freedom of Information Act request into the federal government looking for it, those cannot be disclosed. Those are confidential. So I know that's a big fear people have of disclosing pricing to anybody.
But good point.
But it's one of those things you have to do to justify your pricing. And again, it's not included in FOIA requests. So it's a complex situation, but if you do it right up front and spend the time up front to get it done, then you have the 5 years of the contract itself. And with the VA contract, there's one evergreen clause, so one more 5-year section that can be extended before you need to redo the contract. So doing it right up front is really important for long-term success.
Yeah, that's good information, and I appreciate you sharing that with us. So I think that probably does the questions that I have for today. But like I said, if we could do this on and make a series out of this, and we'll do this in another session, hopefully maybe in the next few weeks or so. Before you go, I'd like to. I know you guys do a lot of work with a lot of different types of companies,
Sure.
and so I wonder if you could just give us a little hint on, what you guys do to help your clients navigate that whole scene.
Sure. Well, there's a couple different ways to go to the federal market. I mean, you can you can apply for a contract yourself. You could use a consultant to help you get that contract to make sure you do it right. Or you could go with someone like Buffalo Supply. And the way we work is we hold our own contracts. And so we have ECAT, DAPA, IDIQ, VA, GSA. It's all the alphabet soup, right? So we have all these different contracts, and we're always on the lookout for what's coming down the road next. But what we do is we maintain those contracts, and we put your items on our contract, and we negotiate the pricing with you to make sure that the government gets fair and reasonable pricing. And you don't have to go it alone. We've been doing this again since 1983. I've been with the company since 2003. And so we've been doing it a long time. But what it means is up front, you're going to need to disclose that pricing just like you would if you went direct. But afterwards, the real thing that Buffalo Supply brings is we are known in the marketplace. And we maintain compliance. Dotting I's and crossing T's is what we do. So from a manufacturer standpoint, we are a compliance service organization. One thing I always tell people is if you go to the end users and ask who Buffalo Supply is, they'll give you a look and say, I don't know. But if you go into any of the contracting departments or procurement departments at any DoD or VA facility, they'll not only know Buffalo Supply, they'll be like, oh yeah, I've been working with Rhonda for 15 years. I mean, that's kind of the key. That's what we bring to you, is taking that compliance side off, our expertise in maintaining compliance, but also people know us in the marketplace. And we are, we're in the top 20 of all medical supply vendors in the Department of Veterans Affairs. And we've been there floating around depending on what product line you look at, the 8 to 15 range in that for years now. So that's really what we do, is we take that burden off of you and we work hand in hand. And I think one of the other questions is, I had a national accounts person ask me one time what the biggest barrier or hurdle we had to get over with companies. And the first thing I said was, it's probably you. Right? It's probably because your job is to handle this. And but it's important that national accounts people realize they are still just as important as ever. We are helping drive that, but they are working internally. And our best relationships are where we have the best national accounts people. And Gary, you and I back, when I first started, worked hand in hand national accounts for years. And, we've kept up after all this time. And I still have some good friends kind of all over the place. So it's really a partnership. And when we're successful, you're successful.
Well, that's true. And this information is really valuable, and I can go back many years. We worked together very successfully. I can't say enough about what you guys offer out there to the industry. So, okay, well, that's going to do it for this session. So again, I want to say thank you, TJ. Appreciate you coming on board, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Absolutely, it's been a pleasure.